All right. Hope everybody's having a fantastic Thursday. Of course, today we are talking camera integration with the HDL310 and HDL410 systems. So let's get into it. This is a technical training webinar from Nureva. We've done a few of these, and note that we've got a few more coming up in upcoming weeks. So stay tuned for info on that. So the very first thing I'd like to do is just a quick recap. We did a webinar on this subject or similar to this several weeks back, and in that we specifically talked about a deep dive on camera switching and tracking and why we want to do it. We talked about the different types of supported integrations that Nureva can do, and of course the recent update to the HDL310 system that enabled it to provide sound location data. Today, though, we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive, explaining integration with the HDL310 and 410 systems specifically, noting that these systems are effectively interchangeable when we're talking about this integration. It's really going to be dependent on the room size, resolving in what type of system you want to use. I've got a demonstration of a full integration with the INOGENI CAM230 multi-camera selector. Note that we will be, again, providing this recording out to you, so just feel free to watch along and take some notes. And finally, we will explore placement and cover divisible spaces for the different camera layouts. There's a lot of thought that you should be putting in when you're doing a camera setup, especially when we get to talking about divisible spaces. First thing I'm going to touch on, though, is the actual hardware integration. The equipment required for successful camera integration is as follows. You'll need an HDL310 or HDL410 device. Here you can see pictured the HDL310. Of course, the 410 adds a second bar and enables larger rooms. You'll need access to the Nureva app via mobile device or browser connection. I'll touch on that a bit more in a minute. As these devices require network connectivity to complete the integration, you will need network access at the site. If the system is meant to be standalone with only a USB connection to a computer, at minimum, a basic network switch capable of assigning a DHCP address is necessary. A lot of this stuff talks over some type of network connection. The INOGENI CAM230, for example, requires that direct network connection, but it doesn't have to be part of the customer's standard network. You can do this on just a simple switch. Now you're going to need at least one camera, although we recommend two to enable switching. Tends to work a little bit better. And of course, an interface capable of talking with the camera, enabling the use of sound location data. Some examples are the INOGENI hardware that we're going to discuss today, or Crestron software interfaces. In today's presentation, as I mentioned, we will be talking specifically about integrating the HDL310 and HDL410 systems with the INOGENI CAM230 and the Lumens CamConnect hardware interfaces. If you were looking to do a software-based integration, please start with our API documentation found at developers.nureva.com. And then certainly if you require any support in doing that type of integration, reach out to us, support@nureva.com, and you'll hear that email address a few times throughout today's presentation. The Nureva app is a fantastic tool if you're not aware of it. Now, just want to touch on this real quick before we talk about why you need this for the camera integration. The iOS portion of this app features two absolutely fantastic tools, the ability to do a reverberation measurement, as well as a background noise measurement. Now, the key thing to take away here is by using our app, you are calibrating your iOS device to work very well for audio measurements. We've worked with Apple to understand what their microphones can do, and we calibrate our systems as such. So this effectively turns your iOS device into a partial SPL meter capable of doing these two measurements. Highly recommended if you suspect a space needs any sort of acoustic treatment, for example. However, if you are setting up camera switching, you do need access to the app. The app, again, is available as a mobile download to your iOS or Android device, or you can use it on a Windows PC. You use this app to update your devices, manage settings and features. You do that acoustic check on iOS like I was talking about, as well as a host of troubleshooting tools. But again, access to this app is required for HDL310 and HDL410 camera switching. More on that on our support site, support.nureva.com. Now I'm going to get into some specific hardware integration examples. First off, we're looking at the INOGENI CAM230 integration with just an HDL310. Very simple, very straightforward integration. You can see we've got the Connect module and the HDL310 microphone and speaker bar. Those talk via Ethernet cable to the INOGENI CAM230 as part of that network integration, which I'm going to go over in just a moment, as well as some computer connections that need to be made. The Nureva system always requires connection to that PC for regular UC&C communications. However, once the INOGENI CAM230 is set up, you don't need to have that USB cable plugged in. Specifically, you've got about 7 steps that you want to take while you're going through this. Ensuring your devices are updated is the most important one. Obtaining a REST API token so things can talk. Enable camera switching. Confirming placement and dimensions. Very important, I'll tell you why later. Coverage map zones. Configure your switching settings, and finally you're going to test the configuration. Now, that being said, I've got a full video that we're going to go through. It takes about 5 minutes, and I'm going to show you all of these steps in detail. So let's go to that now. Before you set up camera switching, you'll need to make sure your Nureva and INOGENI devices are up to date, and your Nureva HDL410 or HDL310 system must also be connected to the Nureva app. To connect your system to the app, open a browser and in the search bar, enter the IP address for the device. When prompted for a password, enter the device enrollment code and click Continue, and the enrollment code can be found on the bottom of your Connect module. The app will advance to the device management page as you see here, and if a device update is required, you'll see the Update button highlighted. And that's this update button right here. And as you can see, I'm looking for an update. I have one available, so I'll go ahead and click that button now. Now that I've confirmed that my Nureva system is up to date, I'll need to check the firmware version for the INOGENI CAM230. The next step is to generate a new REST API access token. In the CAM230 web portal, select the System tab and go to the Security section. I will choose Generate REST API Access Token, and this very long token has now been generated. I'm going to leave this browser window open, and then I'm going to move on to the next step. Now here are the steps for enabling the camera switching integration. On the Nureva app homepage, open Devices. Then on the plus, press the button and select Camera Switcher. Enter the IP address or the host name. Next, you'll enter the port number. However, port 443 is the default and will apply to most integrations. Then, enter your credentials or paste the REST API access token. If you haven't changed the login credentials, use the default with admin from the INOGENI device. However, I'm going to do the REST API. So I go back to that page that we already had. If you haven't, click onto the REST API token, select Control-A, highlight the entire token, Control-C to copy it, and then the Nureva page where you'll hit a Control-V to paste it, and then simply select Add Device. As you can see, it's been added successfully. HDL410 and HDL310 systems generate a coverage map, which shows their placement in a room. The blue circles on the coverage map indicate where the sound location data is being generated. System placement must first be shown correctly on the coverage map to ensure accurate camera switching. So first, go to the coverage map, then choose to set your dimensions, then accurately measure your room and set the dimensions accordingly. If the system placement shown on the coverage map doesn't match the actual placement in the room, the system should be calibrated. And as a tip, hit this Clear Sound Data button, and then take a look at where the sound location data is applied in the room. Does it seem correct? If not, hit the Calibrate button. To create camera zones in the coverage map, start by pressing Create Zone in the side menu on the coverage map page. A zone will appear in the center of the coverage map. Drag the zone within the coverage map and adjust the size using the drag handles. Then, press Apply to save the zones. Now we'll look at how to assign cameras to zones. First, you'll need to select a zone to view the zone tools. Click the camera icon to open a menu of connected cameras. Then assign a camera to the zone and click Apply. The INOGENI CAM230 activates camera switching when it detects sound in a specific zone for at least 1 second. If no sound is detected, it switches to the default camera. The default time for triggering the switch is 1 second, and this can be adjusted. To do this, open camera switching. Then you can change the minimum time to trigger a camera switch and the maximum time to trigger a switch to the default cameras.
Yeah, it's actually
The default camera is the one that the CAM230 switches to whenever voices are not being detected. To assign the default camera, open the camera switching menu on the coverage map and select a camera from the default camera menu.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Commands are sent to the INOGENI CAM230 to use a specific camera based on the sound location data and trigger timing. The active cameras will be underlined on the coverage map, as you can see in Zone 2. The underline will change between any cameras as they are triggered, and now you're all set for camera testing. Perfect. Okay, so that was that demo video. If you want a copy of that, we should have that posted very soon. Noting that there will be a slightly longer version available online that shows a few other things like updating the INOGENI specifically. Although for today's time, we just had to cut that back a little bit. However, we're going to get talking about a few other things here next, specifically the HDL310 and Lumens CamConnect configuration. Now, this configuration is going to be a little bit different in the sense that we've got the same microphone speaker bar, the Connect module is the same. However, this time we're not integrating USB or HDMI cameras through something like the INOGENI CAM230. We're using the Lumens CamConnect Pro. Notice that the network integration is still going to be required. We've got that network switch, but this time we're now using 3 Lumens network-based cameras. So again, a little bit different. The other key difference here is when I'm doing the integration, I'm not going to add this specifically as a device. I'm going to integrate this as a local integration. So when you're doing your setup, you'll find that you need to go to the sidebar or the bottom bar, depending on what your interface looks like for the app itself, and you'll find a local integration under the settings tabs. So once you've done that, you'll set it up as you see here. You'll enable the Nureva system to talk to the CamConnect via the network by adding it, and then you will do the similar with the portal for the CamConnect, which I'll show in just a second here. You'll leave the IP address to be the same as your CamConnect, but the port will also not change unless, of course, your network administrator says that you need to do that for reasons. Now, when you're doing the Lumens integration part, you will connect up to the CamConnect processor. This is done via its portal, accessed by its IP address, or by connecting a mouse, keyboard, and HDMI display to the CamConnect processor. And that's actually the method that I prefer. I would advise you to refer to the CamConnect documentation specifically for these next steps, and you can find a link on our site, support.nureva.com, by searching for Lumens. Or Google the Lumens CamConnect manual. It does contain product-specific steps specifically for the Nureva devices. Now, one thing I will add in as a point of caution, something that I did experience recently, and I don't know if this is something Lumens is fixing or changing, but when I did the upgrade to the Lumens web portal specifically, I found that it wasn't pulling down the latest version of its firmware, and I actually had to go to their website to get that firmware. Other than that, the instructions that I had worked absolutely fantastic. So if you are doing either of these integrations, the CamConnect, the CAM230, or anything else that I've talked about up to this point, and you need assistance, you can email us at support@nureva.com or go to support.nureva.com for additional assistance. Now, the next part of the presentation that I'm going to talk about specifically is camera layouts. I get a lot of questions about where cameras could go, especially with the visible spaces. And the big thing to think about here is, what does your room look like? Where are the people sitting? What type of use case do you have? So I've got a few spaces to go over here next. Presentation spaces, they're your classic space to support instruction from a few individuals in front of the room, or perhaps you've got collaborative style seating. The core need for these spaces is clear view of the presenters. The other challenge I hear about in these spaces is remote equity. Is the remote attendee getting the same experience as in the room? Presentation spaces include seeing other in-room participants and not just the presenter. Often there are interactions during presentations, but they're not visible. And of course, the larger the space, the harder the challenge to see participants and the instructor clearly. Now we've got these long spaces, more of a collaboration space potentially. These long spaces are where the remote display is on a short wall, also called traditional boardrooms or even like a bowling alley type design. The needs here are typically being able to see any of the in-room participants at that long table, and in larger spaces, you may have people in a second row on other walls. On the outside walls. The challenges here are participants are small at the head of the table towards the back of the camera view, so those folks that are further away, of course, harder to see. Depending on seating and camera angles, views can also be blocked, especially when you get into multiple rows. Covering tables and outer regions can be a challenge, again, depending on where you have those cameras, how you have them set up. The wide space provides a bit of a different challenge, as everyone's seen clearly on the left and right side of a wide space. Where the remote displays are on that long wall, they are going to be wider than they are deeper. You need a clear view of each participant, and depending on seating and table arrangement, these can be good for clear line of sight, but there can also be multiple rows of participants. The challenge for these spaces is going to generally be, can a single camera see everyone clearly? And typically, no, you don't have an angle on your lens wide enough to see that entire space. Seeing locations at the near corners can be hard, and it can just provide all sorts of challenges for seeing folks on the outside edges. Next, we're going to talk about these flex spaces. Larger spaces that are, more flexible to be a good use of space. They could alternate between table-based collaboration discussions and front-of-the-room presentations. Whiteboards and flip charts on a sidewall could be there. Perhaps you've got several touchscreen displays. These spaces have the same needs and challenges as presentation spaces and collaborative spaces. And the new problem that we're addressing for the current use, front of the room, sidewall collaboration, and informal seating. They're flexible, they change around quite a bit. And then finally, the divisible room, another type of large space that requires flexibility. This features some type of room divider that can be used to divide or combine the space. Some rooms have multiple dividers, making for potentially complex setups with multiple cameras and switching networks, although the Nureva audio solution always remains simple. The room types then fall into the long, wide, flexible categories, so the ones that we've already covered. And of course, we just did a webinar where we did divisible rooms. So if you're interested in more information on that, again, support.nureva.com, reach out to us. We'll get you a link to that if you didn't happen to see that presentation. So as I go through and I've described each of these rooms, the problems that we face, now let's take a look at how we can solve them. The presentation space. So what are we trying to solve for? People needing to see the instructor, people needing to see the students for equity, that remote equity. The solution, tracking cameras for presenter, AI shines here, and then switching cameras for the student views, where AI struggles to use a preset recall. So you've got that tracking camera, can follow your presenter around, your instructor throughout the classroom, and then we'll switch to that wide-angle audience shot every once in a while. Somebody has a question, that sort of thing. The camera placement, of course, back to the room for presenter tracking, and front of the room for audience capture. Now, we would be able to track a subject in front of the room while capturing audience engagement, and that's really going to solve those two issues that we want to resolve. The long space, this bowling alley with the display on the short wall, well, we need to be able to see everyone equally, especially toward the back of the room. There's a hot mic there. Somebody can just turn it off, please. Oops, I stepped forward a little bit. And Camera tracking here with fixed presets is going to be the common solution. Another way could be combining this camera with switching for additional camera views down the long walls. So you can see here we've got a couple different options, potentially with tracking cameras on either side of that display, or perhaps we've got a fixed view that looks into the room with tracking cameras on either side. But this is going to allow us to cover multiple camera angles regardless of the desk, podium, or chair configuration. So we're really going to give you a lot of options by going with a POV fixed angle camera on that north wall, and then potentially a couple of PTZ cameras on the east and west sides of the wall. Again, just allowing for full view. The wide space here, well, again, as I mentioned, it's really hard to see out to the sides just because that level of coverage, or finding a camera that's going to have that enough of a wide angle lens on it. So what do we do here? Well, camera tracking with fixed presets is one common solution, but then another is to combine this with camera switching for additional cameras down the long wall for clear views. So we could go with a POV camera with a wide field of view for the front of the room, but then again, we do some tracking cameras on the side to allow for that movement, or perhaps we go with just 3 fixed shots. Again, this is going to be a little bit more use case dependent. When we talk about flex spaces, well, this is where things get interesting, and really where that planning is required, because this is going to be a combination of everything that we just talked about it, and there might be changes between the presentation and table-based collaborations. So not only is it a flexible space in terms of what we can do in there, we might be moving things around, changing things up, so you're going to need some flexibility with those cameras. So this is where that presenter and audience solution to switch from typical table setups into a long wide boardroom comes in. And we're going to take that same approach for a sidewall with a whiteboard flip chart. We're doing a fixed camera at the front of the room, but then we potentially got fixed, or maybe all 3 cameras track independently. Again, this is the type of space where you want to add in the most amount of flexibility with your setup to allow for tracking and multiple different types of setups. Now, the last one that I'm going to touch on here, specifically that divisible room, and this takes everything that I've just talked about and kind of rolls it up into one. The main point is to make in the divisible room, and when we talk about cameras, is to understand how the camera positioning relates to the room when divided and then combined. Very similar to that flexible space. We're making a change in the room. Are the camera angles still relevant? Do the cameras need to be moved? Will the viewing angle be enough to cover the audience and presenter? Do we need additional cameras? All of these things need to be thought about when you're doing that setup. Some of the things you could do are, cameras on different sides of the room. Well, that works when it's combined, but when we divide it, now we've got this bigger space, so perhaps we want to do something more like that flexible space and bring in that presenter view as well as multiple fixed cameras. Again, very dependent on thinking through the use case and how people are going to do it. Again, as I mentioned, positioning is key. Try to set up the cameras to capture multiple setups without needing to move cameras or a new location. And if multiple views are required, look for something that is IP-based, like a Lumens or Crestron solution, as Ethernet cable is effectively inexpensive versus bringing in USB or HDMI extenders, which can then cause additional issues. For cameras that must be physically relocated, though, perhaps you want to have multiple mounts so you can accommodate a quicker and more repeatable setup. Pick the camera up, plug your Ethernet cable into the back, set it down, you're good to go. So to recap here, the Nureva app is required, the Nureva support site contains useful guides and specific device reference information for successful integration. And finally, the Nureva app is required for setting up the HDL310 camera integration and provides several additional tools and features. Integration can happen in a variety of ways, depending on how the cameras and switching devices operate. And placement of the cameras should be considered carefully to maximize viewing angles and meet use case requirements. And as we're getting to the end of the presentation, again, I will refer you to support@nureva.com if you have additional questions that you'd like to follow up with today, or go to support.nureva.com and check out our fantastic content there.